20 years ago, a reality TV series about a struggling promotion aired on Spike TV that, for better or worse, would go on to change the landscape of sports and pop culture. This is a retrospective of that series, its key players, and its lasting legacy. This is TUFtwenty.
TUFtwenty is brought to you by The Contrarians, a movie podcast where we are right and you're wrong. Be sure to subscribe to The Contrarians on your favorite podcatcher for access to this entire series, as well as Julio and Alex's most recent film follies. Our main website, wearethecontrarians.com, houses all of our past episodes as well.
You can find The Contrarians across social media under the handle @ContrarianPrime.
It's not just us, though. As for this 14-part journey of nostalgia and shame, we've got a championship corner.
I'm Joe Holbert, and for years I've discussed fake fighting on the internet. Now, however, I'm trying my hand at the real thing. Usually, you can find me at the Late Night Grim, but for this particular adventure, I'll be sitting under the Team Couture learning tree, providing insight to my fellow men of honor.
It's niche micro-celebrity Steve. You may know me from Twitter, the Songs with Friends podcast, or various scuffles in the world of professional wrestling. By the end of this journey, you are no doubt going to feel this, because this is the ultimate.
Now that the cage door is locked, let's get down to business.
Time to talk asparagus.
It's Monday night, January 24th of 2005. It's time for another episode of The Ultimate Fighter, Episode 2, Team Challenges. The previous episode, we met our cast and crew. We were introduced to Dana White, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, the figureheads of this, and the 16 men that will be participating in The Ultimate Fighter over the weeks to come. The teams were selected. We got some sparring, some drinking, and getting to know a little bit of personalities so far. It seems as though, at least here in the first and second episode, Chris Lieben's going to be our center focus, for better or for worse, and I think I know which one.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Julio, we learned of Coach Carter, Samuel L. Jackson's, the Sam Jackson vehicle from 2005 that reigned box office supremacy. Did it make it to week 2? What were the top 5 movies at the time of the second episode of The Ultimate Fighter?
Well, Alex, we're still in January, so of course we're still getting a lot of stuff that people don't know how it's going to play. We had a couple of Wednesday releases on January 19th, most notably the documentary With God on Our Side, George W. Bush and the Rise of the Religious Right in America.
Ooh.
Not relevant to present day at all. That did not make the top 5, but there's a couple of movies that did. That Wednesday, the remake of Assault on Precinct 13 came out, starring Ethan Hawke. And perhaps more importantly, on January 21st, the comedy, I guess, Ice Cube vehicle Are We There Yet came out. So, if somebody can knock Coach Carter, Sam Jackson, off the number 1 spot, it would be Ice Cube, right? But did it happen? And the answer is, well, stick around for this recap. Coming in at number 5, Assault on Precinct 13. Ethan Hawke made it to the top 5. Coach Carter dropped all the way to number 4.
Wow.
Number 3, still strong, Meet the Fockers.
Man, holding there.
Number 2, kind of a surprise. In Good Company moved up. That usually doesn't happen, but it somehow, I guess, word of mouth
it has
spread.
America's sweetheart, Dennis Quaid, in it.
Yes. Speaking of relevant stuff to present day. And then number 1, Are We There Yet? I guess it was inevitable. Ice Cube doesn't mess around.
Dude.
Especially when he makes family-friendly comedies.
That movie's budget was $30 million.
Well, it made $22 million on that first weekend, so
made $100 million overall.
Weren't they mostly in an SUV during that movie?
Ice Cube ain't cheap, man.
Yeah.
28 of that went to Cube's pocket. All right. Well, I guess now the cliffhanger for episode 3 is, does Ice Cube hold on for 2 weeks? Who can be the box office champion of January 2005? We will find out. Over in the professional wrestling side of things, the Monday Night Raw that led us into episode 2 of The Ultimate Fighter, we opened, oh man, this was that glorious era that Joe and Steve, you know what I'm talking about, where it seemed like every week on Raw there was a 6 or 8 man tag that just went 15 minutes and was a banger. The one on this installment was Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, and Shawn Michaels defeating Christian, Edge, and Tyson Tomko in 1325. Viscera defeats Tajiri in an over-the-top rope Royal Rumble qualifying match in 27 seconds. No justice for Tajiri. Batista defeated La Resistance in a 2-on-1 handicap Royal Rumble qualifying match. Muhammad Hassan, less said the better, defeated Val Venus, God, what a problematic match from start to finish there. Muhammad Hassan defeated Val Venus in a Royal Rumble qualifying match in 441. Kane defeated Gene Snitsky and Maven in a triple threat Royal Rumble qualifying match in 2 minutes. And Randy Orton and Ric Flair went 14:05 with the Viper coming out on top there in the main event. This, of course, Joe, during the illustrious babyface push of Randy Orton in 2005.
Right. I didn't want to correct you on your own show, Alex, but the wrestling show that's famous for 6-mans and 8-mans is actually All Elite Wrestling Presents Collision, which aired in the late 80s, led by CM Punk. So I just wanted to, for anyone, because some people, I don't want people to have to correct you on Twitter, and so I did it for you guys, okay? There it is.
Yes, the show that has their world title challenger wrestling Evil Uno on it. But damn it, Joe, I already had a CM Punk note in my thoughts here, and I did not expect two Phil Brooks name drops to come in this episode.
Is he going to sue us now?
Someone might.
Yeah, Julio's very familiar with Phil Brooks. He watched his movie Girl on the Third Floor. You liked it a lot, didn't you, Julio?
Yes, a highlight of her Roxina journey.
All right, so episode 2 of The Ultimate Fighter Team Challenges, as I mentioned. The names, don't worry, folks. The episode titles get more and more hilarious as we go along. This is a good time here to talk about the living conditions these guys were in. The show was filmed over the course of 8 weeks, and I don't know if there's any pen to paper, if this is etched in stone anywhere, but it seems as though what the conditions in the house were: no music, no reading, no television, video games, no phone calls. That's a big, reoccurring one that comes throughout the entire series of the show. Whatever food you want, unlimited food, and unlimited alcohol. The idea, of course, being drive these guys insane so they're ready to kill each other.
Are you saying it's not their fault, Alex? They were driven to this?
No, it's very much their fault. you got to think, at this point, though, there was nothing to base it on, so I can't imagine they entirely knew what they were getting into. Because also, it's one of those things you think about, just take any one of us, for example. I'm sure there's something in your life you've thought to yourself, oh, yeah, I could do that. And then when you get into it, you're like, what the fuck? I can't do this. And so these guys react in weird ways. Like Diego Sanchez makes a spectacle of himself. I do love that in 2005, yoga was still kind of new. So they treat him like a leper for doing yoga. They're like, oh, he's in there doing that yoga shit. I don't know why Kevin Nash was there, but.
Well, I think it might be partly because of the way he does yoga. Right. Like you said, he makes a spectacle of himself.
He does. There is a general kind of sentiment, though, that the guys who were taking it seriously are nerds, what do you mean you're going to bed, you loser?
Here to party.
Speaking of the beds, they had these large adult grown man athletes sleeping on Pottery Barn bunk beds.
The house, the rooms vary in quality greatly. It looks like they have a nice bathroom, but the kitchen looks like something you would at a TikTok inn. Where they make the continental breakfast and shit. And then you're exactly right. And we'll find as we go through this show, some of the integrity of the house is not the strongest. It was built out of paper mache and crepe paper and whatnot. I guess my question...
So Alex, I wanted, before you get into the second episode, though, I wanted to say something I kind of forgot to say
speak on it
in the first one, which is that so not knowing any of these guys, I'm just basically experiencing it as the show gives it to me, and also not knowing the show. There's no previous seasons to prepare me to how to read this show. I'm just basically learning about the guys and learning about the show as I'm sitting through that first episode. And we've already talked about Chris Libbin and brought him up, and I think that was the thing that basically trained me or taught me what the show was going to be about, in the sense of they have him, the show kind of lets him do these things that I found incredibly annoying, but then has characters or has contestants comment on how annoying they are, which tells me, okay, so the show knows that he's coming across as an asshole, and they've edited it at the very least to give you the impression. So he's they're giving the villain edit in a way, right? Mm-hmm. And which is, at least for me, was slightly comforting, because if they had him do that and then the show gave him
presented him as a baby face.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're like, oh, isn't it funny? Don't you want to see more of this guy? But no, they present him. So that tells you, okay, this show is, and then not just that, but then the end of that first episode has those guys kind of talking to Jason and telling him, hey, you can do it. And they're supportive and they bring him in. And that also tells you whether it's genuine or not. It tells you what the show is trying to do. So which made it a little easier for me going into episode 2. Because if it had been the other way around, dude, I would have been dreading what was sort of like frat boy shenanigans were going to happen later on, where the show would expect me to go, to be entertained by them.
So what you're describing is the Roman Reigns push from 2014 until 2020. That's basically watching TV every week, supposed to cheer for this dickhead. So Lieben is your early, I hope he doesn't win pick.
Oh, not just that. I hope he gets kicked out. That was my feeling. So not to spoil too much, but you can imagine my disappointment during this second episode.
You wasn't the only one. I think most of the team was alongside you on that one, so we'll get there.
Steve, is 6 figures enough to get you to stay in a house with 16 Ultimate Fighters for 8 weeks?
I'm like 5 overtime shifts away from hitting 6 figures now, and I get to sleep in a bed with my wife. So absolutely not.
There's a guy named Mike Wessel who participated in the 10th season of The Ultimate Fighter. And the last episode, in like the last 30 seconds, they're doing the talking heads of, would you do this again? And they're like, there's the guys talking like, this is my dream. I'll do what it takes to make it to the UFC. And they go, Mike Wessel, and they go, would you do it? Fuck no. And then he gets up and leaves.
But they're selling it to you as a training opportunity, right? Like we get some interviews, some like talking heads where they're like, this is amazing. I'm having access to these top tier coaches and I'm learning so much. Is that just PR, or do you think that there's some validity to that?
It's true. And the show's been on the air for 20 years now. So we have a sample pool to pull from of, there's some guys that the format just broke, like they couldn't handle it. Like mentally it just broke them. But it's true that they're able to have access to these world-class coaches. I mean, training with Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture at the time, in the United States, you couldn't do much better than that. And I think the thing that we repeatedly are going to come back to is there was no previous example for this, especially because MMA was so in the doldrums in the United States again, that I could see these guys that have really no ambitions elsewhere just being like, yeah, fuck it, let's see. And I think for some of them too, just the idea of getting to train with Randy or Chuck was enough incentive.
Yeah.
And to get to be on TV. I mean, a lot of these guys know where every camera is.
That was a huge difference too. Of like, now there's so many of those bigger camps, right? The guys prospects come out of regularly. So a lot of the time, the Ultimate Fighter today, you'll get guys that are like already training with world-class fighters. Some of these dudes are like, this is an insane experience. But then it doesn't mean that it's worth the rest that comes with it, clearly. But it definitely was a different time. There's a smaller pool of like, high-level minds in regards to the martial arts. There's no high-level minds in mixed martial arts beyond the actual martial arts itself, of course. But in terms of the technique and such, it was a huge opportunity for sure.
And I think that's expressed expertly in timid Dana White. He's not yet. Now he basically just yells everything. That's how he talks. Like back here, he's, I'm Dana White. I haven't had my teeth done yet. And his voiceover, his opening voiceover, I laughed out loud at. He's just going on about how difficult it is to get into the UFC. And this is a promotion that had Sean Gannon fight for them. And they gave CM Punk not 1, but 2 pay-per-view outings.
Well, go back to the economy of kind of mixed martial arts at the time. There were plenty of guys in the UFC who weren't making 5 figures. Mm-hmm. So or 6 figures, excuse me. So if these guys see this
probably
opportunity,
5,
yeah. I can sweat this out for 10 weeks or whatever it is and get a decent contract, because it's not like there was a secondary company to work for. Most of these guys were working at Best Buy or whatever and fighting in the afternoon or fighting in the evenings and training in the evenings, just trying to get a little bit of money. So the idea that you can fast track your way to a better spot on the roster than most guys, financially speaking, probably would have been very appealing in 2004, 2005.
And Dana also offers here that no one trains harder than UFC fighters, and that's a fact. So he's laying the groundwork here early for his Trumpian-like delivery of lies.
That was one of the few things that I like directly quoted when I was watching. It's the confidence on, and that's a fact. It's like, according to who?
Olympians, maybe?
Yeah, like what?
So I am very excited here for our first talking point. Diego Sanchez and Stefan Bonner argue over asparagus because Sanchez ate the asparagus heads and left the stalks in the fridge. I did not remember the asparagus thing happened this soon into the show, so I'm glad we got to it in the second episode here. Just the insanity of Stefan Bonner, two grown men here, Stefan Bonner towering over him, just reading him the riot act for eating all the asparagus heads. And then Diego has the gumption to offer that he doesn't know what asparagus is. The tension's there. There's not like the pushing and shoving, but it's so funny. I think it really stresses what we talked about, the living conditions. These guys just have to find something to get mad about. Are
you guys on one team or the other as far as this argument?
When this show aired in real time, Stefan was my favorite. Like, I wanted him to win the show. So I would I would have been like, yeah, Stefan, you tell him about that asparagus.
Well, there's a great quote that came out of this where Diego's like, "You're not my dad." And Stefan's like, "Well, I don't know if I'm your dad for sure."
At one point, he says to Diego, like, "Don't play stupid." And I was thinking, God, if Diego got a cent every time he was sold that, right? If he got a buck every time, he'd be a millionaire by now. And forget a 6-figure contract. But yeah, this was one of those conversations that definitely, I mean, the first episode, I used the word shame a few times. Like watching these grown men have this conversation and take it that serious, especially Diego, because he's annoyed, but he had that sarcasm, right? He could be kind of funny in that way, but Sanchez is like, there's not a hint of irony to the conversation he's having. He's just so mad, like.
And Diego, yeah, Julio, there's an interesting road ahead for that young man. But one of the things I'll just tell you now to give you an insight to his mental capacity, he's fought before with no cornerman. Just like he had like a guy there to give him positive reinforcement. He was like a shaman or something. He's got a few screws loose. I think most of them have been knocked loose by his fights. But here he was young and ready to conquer the world. And then we double up on the conflict with Stefan and Diego, where Diego's in the bath and then he'll get up and walk over to the shower in his swimsuit. And what troubled me most here is Stefan's lamenting about the carpet getting wet. Who puts carpet in a bathroom? And this is only episode 2. We got a long road to go.
We sure do. It is. I mean, I think he's annoyed at first, but Diego's so oblivious, right? It's like it gets him more and more mad.
Goes and does yoga.
Well,
are you guys have you guys done that? Like the hot bath alternated with cold shower back and forth?
No, I only have one vessel in my home for bathing, so I would have to set up an elaborate tub system and buy copious amounts of ice. I just don't see this being a thing that I'm ever going to do.
Just Steve in his blue Team Liddell swim shorts, just walking across his house. All right, so we're getting into the challenges here. This is where it gets exciting. One thing I have a note of here, 2 things regarding Chuck Liddell. It seems as though, like Terry Kaiser in Friday the 13th, Part 7, Liddell is always entering frame. It never like starts on him static. He's always walking in, and y'all be mindful of Chuck's walk here, his gait. He is always walking like he just had 5 beers at lunch. Like that's the way, and maybe he did. The Iceman liked to party. But what a just strange individual Chuck Liddell is. Like you said, if you look up cage fighting in the dictionary, you would see that. But just watching his mannerisms and his moving here, and one of the good things Joe called out was the idea of this eventually became the coaches couldn't be in the same place because they get so mad. All the talking heads with Chuck and Randy here are so mild-mannered. Like, yeah. I mean, they shouldn't be drinking that much.
Chuck and Randy wandered into the frame from having lunch at Hooters.
Randy's like full like movie coach in this, right? He like at one point he does that line. It's like it's episode 2, and he goes, "These fellas, they're proud to wear the green." What?
Sadly, Chuck Liddell speaks very clearly and fluidly here, which is we can't say the same for him today, so that kind of bummed me out for a second. But not long enough, because Willa Ford enters frame, our host here. So
pause real quick. Do any of you guys know who Willa Ford was in her previous life before this?
Not previously, but there's something that happened after this that ties directly to our show, our podcast. So, Steve, no, I do not have knowledge of Willa Ford prior to this. What was she doing?
Willa Ford was probably a C-tier a pop singer circa 2001. I think she was dating a Backstreet Boy, possibly.
God bless.
And she made it to TRL with her hit song, I Wanna Be Bad. And then disappeared immediately, only to resurface as the host of The Ultimate Fighter 4 years later.
When she made it to TRL, this is exactly where she saw herself.
Yes.
Standing in an empty warehouse.
The show is a direct answer to the question, to the request on her song. She wanted to be bad, and here she is.
Last episode, we referenced from Kelly to Justin, and this will be from Carson to Dana.
My God. She also did a bit of acting, Julio. And she was one of the unfortunate victims to visit Crystal Lake in the reprehensible 2009 Friday the 13th remake.
Wait, so who is she in the 2009? Is she the one that dies in the water? I guess she.
Bingo. Good one, man.
Well, it's just my process of elimination because I think I knew everybody else.
Yeah, she gets the machete in her head and then is lifted off out of the water. That movie's very bad. Watch The Ultimate Fighter instead. It may also be very bad.
She is better in that movie than she is in these two episodes we've seen so far.
There's like clearly ADR, like when she is doing some of her lines, explaining the challenge. It'll be her and be like, for this challenge, you have to do this. And then it cuts to a wide shot. And then it's clearly like voiceover work that was done, months after the fact. So Willa Ford, our host here, this is not a reoccurring bit, Julio. We do not have like a game show host like this in any other season, I don't think.
This game show stuff really, really took me by surprise because everything that they had set up made it sound like the eliminations were going to be about. I expected the eliminations were going to be like two guys fighting and whoever loses is eliminated. That's what made sense.
Yeah.
Them carrying the coaches on a platform, it seemed a little unfair. I mean, I understand that there's a logic to it in the end. There's just an excuse to have the coaches make the decision, and then the decision is made based on what they've seen so far. It just felt to me like they hadn't seen enough to make that call. Well, maybe in the case of the first elimination they had, but still, it seemed off-brand. You guys knew that this was coming.
I kind of did, but I also had forgotten, because eventually the Ultimate Fight would settle into exactly what you described, which is every episode there'd be a fight at the end and loser goes home. So I'd forgotten that this is just like an entire piece of the show. It's just this challenge. Like it's... it really makes no sense whatsoever. I agree with you completely. I think it worked out because ultimately who goes home, I think it made sense, but it's insane. In what world would this explain to the public what MMA is? Like, what is being achieved with this?
On that note, Joey, explain to us what our first challenge is here. There's some visual comedy for sure here, but what are they actually doing?
Well, the coaches are seated on these pretty hefty around. They're sitting back, and all four so displaying to the divisions. So the 4 middleweights both have to hoist them up, and each run them a distance. I don't know what the distance was. I didn't listen close enough to our friend Willa Ford, but. But of course, naturally, this requires an immense deal of strength. And unfortunately, what that produces is the incredible visual, which is the one thing I remember from season 1 beyond anything else, which is poor Randy falling into the water as he's and Randy's doing like pep talks because, again, he's like the movie coach in this. And Chuck sort of appears, he feels like he could fall asleep, it appears. So that's the deal. All 4 guys have to hoist them up above their head in this big chair, and it's ridiculous. It doesn't feel like a big budget affair. I'll put it that way.
You're exactly right with Chuck. Like there was one shot. I'm like, he's going to doze off there, man. These guys, he's given instruction. They just stopped. And Randy, come on, boys. We're catching up to him. It's like it's war in the fucking 1800s, just trying to catch up.
Stick with it, fellas. Come on.
So Team Liddell wins this. And then we see just how insanely aggro these guys are, just celebrating like they fucking, just won the World Series or something. And then cutting to the talking heads of like, we took their morale, we sucked it out of them. It's just, I don't know. We're all pretty mild-mannered men. I can't imagine getting that psyched up about carrying Chuck Liddell after his 5-beer lunch on a recliner. More drinking back at the house. That commences later that night. Here's our note. Later that night, Luden Kincaid is making jokes about being homosexual, like dressing in dresses. As wrestling fans and the shame kicks in. There's some things that have aged very poorly. And watching this, it's not even funny. It's just, awkward television. And it's like, okay, the joke is that he could possibly be gay. And then Mike Swick says something like, I'm not homophobic, but I don't hug dudes. It's like, all right. Self-defeating argument there, brother.
Yeah, my notes on that in order. Load in, quotation, gay in Speedos, bending over. Swick, I'm not homophobic. Willa is a charisma vacuum.
Fair.
It's I think that the part that makes it all kind of not good. I mean, there's a lot of it. It's not good, but because they conflate the fact that Ladoon, that's his name, right? Like he's also low-key an alcoholic, right? Like they talk about his drinking problem, and they connect that to the fact that I guess he dresses in drag and tries to like psych
they try to give him
out.
like this redemption arc in this episode.
Yes, at some point they scare him straight, and I don't know. Does that mean that he stops drinking, or does he also stop dressing in drag in front of the guys? I guess I'll find out as the season goes on.
Yeah, there's that scene. There's that moment where that would be generous. There's an attempt at a conversation where Forrest is, right, who's like just beating the hell out of him for being an alcoholic, and he's like, he's like to say it's not handled, with any kind of delicacy would be an understatement. It's like aggressively gross, to be honest. Yeah. It has no place on TV, and the fact that this is like the 1-2 punch follow up to Lieben's antics is, which is still going on. It should be noted. We'll get to those, but it makes for a wild watch, definitely.
We get some clips from the then version of WEC. I kind of marked out for that, Joe, like the triangle cage or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it's as Lieben's drinking continues and he's talking shit to Mike Swick. They reminisce on the fight they had previously, which the replay shows it's a pretty standard Chris Lieben affair where he just gets bombed on and then, finds the hammer of Thor and knocks a dude out.
Yes. It is very funny that like Chris, he's so oblivious to why he's a dick here. And he's like, why am I not allowed to talk about this? This is one of my best wins. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, can you... because the guy that you beat is right next to you. Like, maybe you can just chill a little bit. I don't know.
He said, calling me out makes me emotional.
This episode, I think you really get an idea of like the fragility of that dude, right? Beyond all the bravado in episode 1 and him calling everyone names, he's going to do this and that. I mean, he was so unprepared to be under this kind of spotlight, and it shows immediately. And this episode, I think, reveals it even more.
Yeah, it's a very good call. Later in the episode, we get my singular favorite shot of this season, and I will chronicle that as we move along. Steve, I need you to do something for me real quick. Explain to the lads here and the listening public Mike Swick's sideburns. Let's talk about him.
Yeah, honestly, everything about this presentation was so 2005. I didn't even think it was out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
It's
unfortunately
they're razor sharp, man. He
Yes.
forget elbows. He could cut someone with one of those things.
No, I was more distracted by Lieben's just blatant drunkenness. Like he steals every scene he's in, but not in the way that you want to keep watching him.
Mm-hmm.
He's the loud drunk guy at the party that you're going to look at him whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
In more ways, in this case, it is literally. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, it's an excruciating watch, to be honest. Because I think everyone who's seen this remembers Lieben being like the villain. But it's different remembering. It's like actually just seeing. It's just like over and over again. He's at every turn making a fool of himself in this deal. It's deeply unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mentioned to Joe off air that Lieben has the SIVO voice of a man who's thrown up many times in his life already at this point. This is not a new problem for him, I think.
He's got an interesting road ahead of him in life, but I'm sure he right now was with us would agree with us that it's. I can't imagine he can watch this back. It's got to be painful shit. Man.
Yeah. He's in fear of spoiling things. There will be many sad stories. He's thankfully on the more positive side because he's going to be a bit of a punching bag for us here. I think it's fair to say. So we'll kind of put that out there for anyone who doesn't know. But yeah.
So because they lost the light heavyweights challenge, Team Couture has to send a member of the team. They have to eliminate him. You got to hit the fucking bricks. So It's like the ending of an episode of The Bachelor. He like lines up the prospects and then details like why his life would be better with them and without them.
Yep.
So who does he brings up? Chris Sanford and Jason Thacker, right?
No, it's Loden, isn't it?
Oh yeah, because this is where Loden has to apologize for being a drunk. Yeah,
of course, yes.
This is the inciting incident. This is the canon moment where his life changes. At least as presented in this episode. After this, Loden says, "Okay, I'm done with drinking, and I'm gonna be a better person."
They should have had like a shot of him back at the house putting like his dresses in like the trash can and like, I'm done with this part of my life.
Were you guys disappointed? Do you even remember with the outcome here, or were you like, that tracks? This was the only way that this could have panned out.
Yeah, Thacker's an interesting cat, but it's very obvious, even just in these clipped shows, that like he was not in shape to be there, and likely if he ended up in the cage with any of those guys, he would have gotten hurt.
Yeah, he's kind of a mystery man in that. There was a feature done, maybe 10 years ago now. I think it was Chuck Mindenhall did it, and he found Thacker and what he was up to, and it's like it's kind of been theorized since then that he was exclusively put in this show as like an example of, a normal person who could not possibly be an ultimate fighter. That's what the theory is, that he was here as like, which is, incredibly cruel and explains a lot about the way he's presented. But if you look at his fighting record, like he had some Muay Thai background, but he didn't really have any reason to be on this show at all, actually. Like he didn't have a credential, any credentials beyond that. So he's a sad case. He's also like the obvious elimination. Randy's big compliment to him is like, you've become a mascot for our team. Like, if you're ever in a situation where someone's picking between you and someone else and they call you the mascot, you will not you're out of there. It's over. Move on.
But dramatically, it's a better story if he sticks around, right?
Because
you would just set him up. I guess this is how they separate themselves from wrestling. They're like, if this was wrestling, we would keep the poor Canadian that's being picked on, and we're going to build up his storyline throughout the season so that he wins. But this is the real world. So no, he has no place here. Send him away.
As Alex said, the fight would have probably been it would not have been an uplifting tale of a guy overcoming the odds. It would have been pretty violent. Based on what we saw at the training, it would not have gone very well at all. So yeah, I don't know.
I forgot he was in the light heavyweight category. So he, like him fighting Bobby Southworth or Forrest or something, that bad news bears, man. But yeah, Randy here is the acting chops are on display because he knows that it's a television show. Chuck, like when we get to these examples of Chuck having to do this shit where, he has to eliminate someone, he's just like, you're out of here. Like Randy here is like stressing the moment. Like, I've thought about this. I've been very pensive all day. The dramatic music in the background is just fantastic.
He kind of he bounces back and forth though, which I found very distracting because it makes him feel like he comes across like he's very nervous delivering the news, which I guess maybe that was the intention, but to me it just felt like a dude that was having trouble remembering his lines as he's just like kind of swaying back and forth, and the camera is trying to keep up with him.
Julio, I guess this is as good a time as any, as we go through our first elimination here, to bring up the question of like, is this good TV? We're in this. You've committed to this, so you're stuck with us for the next 12 episodes regardless. But this is like fast food in a sense. And this isn't anything we now know revolutionary. There's 8 million reality shows just like this. But for the episode length, the formula so far, are you finding these kind of easy to get through, or is this kind of girl on the third floor level of torturous for you?
See, here's the thing. I could point out everything that makes it bad TV, but when the episode ended, I had to stop myself from watching the next one.
Oh.
So it makes it effective TV, I guess.
We got a problem, folks.
Well, fair enough.
I considered watching the rest now. It's like I can just, try to be objective about only the first two without not knowing. But then I figured, no, it's a lot more fun if I don't know what's coming up next.
Very fair. I love it. It makes me scared for you, but I love it. When so the elimination happens here with Strange Brew getting booted. And you want to talk about someone else who knew the camera was on, saw that red light, is Bobby Southworth here, where he pulls him in and he's like, he says like, straighten up your shoulders, walk out of here like the warrior you are.
Bobby Southworth had just seen Coach Carter.
Which is, the advice is even funnier because at no point during this show has Thacker shown any confidence, nor has his shoulders ever been. He's just, bless him, he's so out of place. But yeah, I mean, you do need that balance, right? Julio brought it up. You can't just have guys being sort of these savages, and it's hilarious. It's way dramatic, but it adds some range to the show at least.
Joe, you can kind of attest to this, or you're familiar with it, that there is that very weird thing in MMA that does not exist in professional boxing or kickboxing or other, combat sports, of like the idea of we're all in this together. We're warriors. We're brothers sharing the cage there. Like the whole thing of in every MMA fight, it seems, that guys touch gloves at the beginning of every round. You try that. You try touching gloves and boxing in the third round, they're going to take your fucking head off, dude. Like it's, it becomes apparent throughout the course of the show and, further down the line, but I'm not off base by saying that, right? There's this weird, like, forced camaraderie amongst MMA fighters.
Yeah, and I think if we were going to be generous, we would say it's rooted in, like, the kind of foundations of martial arts, but I don't buy it for a second. That's what it is for most of these guys. I don't know. I think there's kind of the machismo element to it. I think it's also they have that very particular tight-knit vibe of, like, no matter what happens in there, the guy that gets in there is a warrior, quote unquote. Which, I mean, absolutely, it's a very particular phrasing that we hear much more in MMA.
Yeah,
I don't know, and it's even part of like the UFC's branding, right? It's in the theme that in their first episode, Steve so wonderfully
bear witness to the fitness of the modern warrior.
Yeah, like it was a big part, and I think there's a whole conversation to be had about guys' willingness to be warriors for a very low amount of money, but that's probably a different conversation for a different day. But yeah, it's a strange thing.
Well, they're probably coached on that too from Dana.
Yeah.
Because part of this was the PR for we're not barbarians. We can have fights, but at the end of the day, everybody love everybody.
Yeah.
And we can do this and still be civil men. But we're warriors. We're fighting for $75 in
that's
the middle
right.
of the desert.
I mean, the thing is, Steve, you got to remember, nobody trains harder than these guys, and that's a fact. You got to remember that. Right?
Nobody.
And that's a fact. It's funny you bring up the pay thing, Steve, because the next episode when Dana White gets his big Oscar speech, that's part of it. Chris Lieben and Kincaid continue to drink, and they start to offend people. Go figure. This is the part where, with complete sincerity, Jason Thacker's from Canada. So Chris Lieben refers to the nation of Canada as Canada, and he's not trying to be funny. He says, yeah, maybe he can beat people up in Canada, but I don't bet down here. And no one bats an eye. This is, it's not a Mensa convention we're dealing with here. These guys are just big meatheads that don't even know how to pronounce the country that borders us.
I didn't bat an eye at that because I am a Jersey Shore enthusiast, and Mike the Situation also says Canada. So it was not new to my ears at all.
Fair play to you.
It is. I mean, it would be a massive overstatement to say Lieben comes across well at any point, but this is probably the closest he is to funny, I think, when the guys are being nice about Thacker and he's just like, he sucked, guys, come on. What are we doing here? It's the closest he is to like, well, maybe we should listen to Chris on this one. I don't know. There's something to this.
His talking head, he's like, if someone dies in a car wreck, that's sad. Someone get eliminated from a game show who had no business being here. I don't give a shit.
That's the closest he is to having us on his side, I think, in these first two episodes.
So this is the part where I said my favorite singular shot of this season. I don't know who it is. Someone, it shows like maybe Stefan or Hoger, some people off in a different part of the house saying, yeah, they're drinking again. And then it gets smash cuts to Lieben sitting alone with a half-drunken 40 in a dimly lit room, staring off into nothingness with his mouth open. It's like, this is the lasting image of Chris Lieben. And then it reveals, it would be better cinematically if it panned out to reveal this, but we find out what he's watching is Diego Sanchez oil up and pose like he's getting ready for a run. Because I guess Diego's on the sauce now, too. They try to like church it up like he's not that bad because he's drinking wine. That actually pays off later in the episode. The idea of like, oh, I wasn't drinking, it was just wine.
But that's weird because in the first episode, he was outspoken against drinking, right? Like he criticized the guys that were drinking, and he was like, "I'm here to train. I'm here to do yoga." And then, I was. It made me think that maybe I was misremembering who had said that in the first episode, but no, it's him.
No, my note simply says Diego wine drunk posing with baby oil. That's the Diego Sanchez story for this episode.
He's pretty jacked. Do you think he would have had a run in Ring of Honor at that point, Joe?
He was too jacked. You answered your own question there, brother. He had a frame on him. He had no place on the DVD product. No way.
Was OVW still the feeding ground?
Yes.
Yes.
It was for another till like 2008, maybe.
Wow.
So Cornette still would have been there. Get Cornette, Diego Sanchez. I'm sure he would have addressed him very respectfully and not problematically at all.
No, Cornette had just been ousted. He had just slapped Santino.
Oh, God.
He was probably watching the Ultimate Fighter.
Well, that's what he says is like, his vision of Ring of Honor was to make it like the UFC where, who did he say? It was Adam Pearce and someone else's commentary team.
Kevin Kelly.
Yeah, we're going to be his Mike Goldberg and Joe Rogan.
To be fair, Kevin was supposed to be Goldberg, but Kevin and Rogan ended up being pretty on the money. You got to give him credit on that one. There's something to that. So yeah, it was that was his vision, for better or worse.
UFC style presentation where Kevin Steen has to have lawyers to make his matches for him and stuff. So. Didn't always used to be better, boys. So Canada. Lieben with the 40, Swick sideburns, more drinking. Okay, here we go. Chris Lieben decides to hop the wall and find a payphone to call someone not mentioned. First of all, nostalgia trip with the payphone. But this becomes a hilarious reoccurring bit through the show's history. The guys that wig out because they can't have a phone call. And I'd forgotten about this part of it because, Dana in the later seasons, when he gets all jacked and shit, screams at people about jumping the wall. Here, I guess he was too scared to reinforce the rules, but he is going off about wanting to make a call, and Luden's just staring at him like, yeah, man, I got you. And then we just see him hop the wall and leave. The note here is amazing. He finds a payphone to call someone. The person is not mentioned.
See, and something about 2005 was he was confident, not knowing where he was, that he could just start walking and that he would run into a payphone. Yeah. Like, how long did he have to trek until he encountered a payphone?
I mean, he was also drunk, so.
Yes.
And the dead of night in, like, Las Vegas in a remote mansion somewhere. I don't know. That's an indie movie right there. Drunken Chris Lieben wandering to find a payphone in the middle of the desert.
An unbroken shot for 90 minutes.
The next morning at practice, Coach Couture finds out about the incident, and Lieben and Sincade apologize for their actions. This is where Chris Lieben says he won't drink again, which lasts 3 hours.
Well, Lieben doesn't apologize. That's because even Couture makes a distinction. One of them owned up to their actions, the other one didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Lieben did promise not to drink for the rest of the show, but Loden tried to frame it as his moment of clarity, as is often spoken about in addiction circles.
Yeah, this shit is like, this all happens over the course of 36 hours. He realized he's an alcoholic and now he's clean. Now he's going to be the ultimate fighter.
We should also note that Randy, because he's obviously so sharp and has so much knowledge as our coach, he declares that there is negative energy. That's how he figures out that something's up here. It is not the extensive film crew that has informed him that Chris Lieben has been drilling. Instead, he says, I'm feeling a lot of negative energy from you, Chris. I got to say, explain yourself.
Lieben also, I think, is the only person I've ever heard use the phrase when you refer to someone who's not good, he says they suck shit. I'm like, dude, can't even swear properly, man. So we move along to the middleweight challenge. I gave Joe the floor for the first challenge. Steve, explain to us the insane activity that our middleweights participate in here.
So they had to saw a utility pole. Did they carry it first before they saw it?
Yeah.
Or that they had to carry a utility pole for a set distance, saw it into multiple pieces, and then carry it and reassemble it using various tools. And these are the smaller gentlemen. So they're having a hell of a time operating the manual saws. At one point, they're jumping on the poles trying to break them. And it's just an absolute disaster of a segment.
Very relevant to MMA, though.
Oh, yeah. This is a skill you're going to need in the cage. And I don't know if y'all caught it, but Chris Sanford here is giving the level of effort of it's, 2 days before Christmas break. And, work's asking you to do some reports or some shit.
He's so done, dude.
It's
He's had
a
enough.
run out the clock situation here for Mr. Chris Sanford. This is what we're talking about. There's a clear reason why they didn't do this again, these types of challenges. It's just these guys are so gassed afterwards.
Yeah. This one's not even like good, because I always remember the one with the recliner, but this was like, what are they doing here? I had no memory of this at all. It was this was a strange deal. I don't know.
You can see their faces while they're explaining it, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
My note says, Liddell's team good at sawing / Sanford sucks.
And this is kind of the first Koscheck kind of takes the lead for Chuck's team. And this is kind of our first exposure to Josh Koscheck, who will, minor spoiler alert, become a very, very central character of this show. At this point, Joe, you seeing money signs in a young Josh Koscheck, or you think it takes a little while for his personality to come out?
It's interesting. I was surprised at how understated he is thus far. He's mostly watching on. You see a couple signs of him like enjoying the chance to, fire other people up. And at times he's like smiling while other guys are arguing. But as you mentioned, he becomes a bigger part and I think is a big memory from this show. One of the things that stands out is in all of his training footage, because the big narrative with Josh was that he was like purely a wrestler going into this show.
Yeah.
But the training footage takes that to like the extreme, right? There's that one part where he's like in someone's guard and Layman's yelling at him, you can punch him. And Josh is just kind of like, it's a fascinating watch. But yeah, he's been pretty quiet thus far. That will change. I think we'll have very strong opinions in the coming weeks and months of this program. But thus far, nothing crazy.
I think visually he stands out though.
Yes.
Because I was like, I can always pick him out. I mean, it's like, he has dyed hair and you're right. He hasn't had like the spotlight, but whenever I'll never get him confused with anybody else.
Right.
And that happens a lot with the rest of the cast.
For sure.
So because of this, Randy has to make yet another decision of who to send home from his team. This one's not as dramatic. Randy's delivery isn't quite as, Brando-esque. And if you watch that challenge, it's really no mystery who he's going to send home.
But again, is it fair?
No.
Yeah, man, he sucks shit.
Okay. So I think the issue is that Sanford, when he has a chance to explain why he should stay, he just exclusively focuses on why Liebman should go. And I think that I don't think helped his case. I mean, it isn't fair, but yeah, he did not appear to be in the condition necessary to be training among the hardest training athletes in the history of the earth. So I think he probably had to go, sadly.
Yeah, Chris Sanford did not bear witness to the fitness that is required of a modern warrior.
During the the last chance promo where you get to explain why you should stay, there's a moment I did not remember that I legitimately laughed out loud at, where just the editing is unbelievable. Where Liebman, they're like, "You're drinking again already," and he's like, "Well, I just had a little bit of Diego's wine." And then it does the doom, a dramatic sound drop. And then it cuts to Diego's face and he just turns like, how dare you bring me into this? A better show would have had Diego charge at him right there to attack him. So something to keep in mind. It doesn't count if it's wine. That's just, that's just a good fun time drink. And Chris Sanford is sent home. Then we get the teaser for the next episode, which, man, in my mind, these are going all over the place, but something to tease you with. We do get Dana White's big Oscar scene in the next episode, and the legendary Bobby Southworth's weight cut.
Yeah, the weight cuts, that's an interesting thing. We should also note that when Randy's middleweights lose the challenge, there's that shot of Liebman. I don't know if he's talking ahead or he's just sitting after the challenge where he's like, I don't know if this is fair, my team sucks. What does it say?
Yep.
He says, he completely removes himself from the situation. He's on one here, dude.
Yeah, if it wasn't for all the annoying drunk shit, that would be pretty beast. Just this guy who tells his teammates that they suck and he doesn't want to be with them. So 2 episodes down, we're learning about our cast and crew here, slowly but surely. Julio, you mentioned Liebman. You want him G-O-N-E. What about any front runners for guys that you're digging, besides Kenny Florian in the BattleBots correlation?
Oh, dude, now he's my number one for sure. But I'll tell you the names I have written down, and so that should tell you, because the other ones they're really I can't. I couldn't pick them out from a lineup, but I have Steven Bonar and Diego Sanchez. Like I just because of the asparagus thing, like they stood out. Chris Sanford, just because I was like, I really hope this guy doesn't go home because otherwise that means that Levin is staying. And then, Canadian guy is gone, so I don't really have any. Oh, and what's his name? Koscheck. Is that his? Yeah, him. Like I said, he seems like a pretty drama-free guy so far. I haven't seen him like get into it with anybody. So I don't know. I have a favorite to win. I just have somebody that I want gone. So I want Levin gone. That's usually how it goes with these reality competitions, though. Right. Like I watch a couple of them. Like I'll watch The Amazing Race. I'll watch like Hell's Kitchen. I don't start with somebody that I want to win. That want them to win. I just start with people that I want to like be weeded out so that the rest of the cast has more time to really make their case so why they should win. So kind of looking forward to more people getting weeded out. I'm curious, when you guys watched it, were you, whether it's fair or not, were you disappointed that Levin stayed? Or were you like, well, it makes for good television if he stays?
I remember from my initial viewing at one point being glad that Levin was there because there's some developments that come about Julio that'll be pretty interesting. And the way things work out the way they were supposed to. I'll just say that.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember at this point, like I said, I just thought he was big and goofy and funny. So my investment was in Stefan. And I thought Diego was he did yoga, so he was weird. And I was like, got to get that guy out of here, man.
Bobby is the guy that gave the hug to Jason, right? Like, okay, he also stood out. I was like, hey, that guy seems like a good guy.
Dude, we have in the episodes in the months to come some hilarity that ensues with one Bobby Southworth. So
yes, sir.
You got that to look forward to. Joe, we're here yet again. The Ultimate Fighter. Upon this viewing, is obviously Levin stands out worse than before. Is there any like so far surprising charm you're finding in any of these guys that you didn't recall?
Not really, no. I think there's definitely a nostalgia for the way they talk about the sport, and when you get the highlight reels of the guys, that stuff. But on a personality, I mean, there's not really anyone here that I would like co-sign and be like, oh, this, I mean, Bobby Southworth thus far has come across pretty well, even if, again, in a kind of admittedly dramatic fashion in that one particular case. But most of the cast has either ranged from they haven't made an impression at all yet, or they've made a terribly negative one. Right? I mean, poor Thacker, you felt bad for. But it's I'm not convinced by the notion that this was this sort of eye-opening, glamorous presentation of the great artistry of MMA. I don't know about that. I don't know about a limb. I think there may be some rewriting history. This show's kind of gross, guys. I don't know. It's pretty bad.
It is definitely more so than I remembered, like junk food, white trash TV. Like it's very like, crash television.
Yep. But in the best case scenario, Alex, and of course you know how this pans out. In fact, you've hinted at it in a way. The best case scenario is when you're watching this type of show and you stick with it, you get past the grossness, you get to see a growth or an apparent growth that makes it somewhat rewarding, right? Like if I'm thinking right now that Chris Levin is a piece of shit, and somehow through the miracle of like television, by the end of the season, I'm kind of pumped because he gets some sort of redemption. That might retroactively make it all worth it as a talking point, right? Like, and so, of course, the problem is that you have to sit through the grossness to begin with.
What you're describing right now is being a professional wrestling fan. From a performance standpoint, Steve, Randy or Chuck, who's the better coach so far?
Oh, man. Randy talks like a man who knows what he's talking about. He is very understated, very supportive to his team. And that part of it could very well be him just knowing how to work for the cameras. Whereas Chuck is just kind of there. And he's like, all right, guys, we're going to do whatever today, man. Like, not as bad as Shamrock would be as a coach later on. But Randy really seemed to have a better organized way of doing things. Where was it Randy or Chuck that said that, I'm not going to train them to fight. I'm going to play to their strengths, and we'll just work on that.
Yeah, I think that was Randy. That's I think this is an example of Randy was famously a very great coach, and from this point and on, Chuck not so much. there's a great example, like George St. Pierre. Patrick Cote once said of George St. Pierre, he's like, he's one of the best fighters in the world. He's the worst coach. Sometimes those fighters just like don't make good coaches. There was a fight that Matt Wyman had in which he trained with Chuck for it. And Chuck was in his corner. And in between one of the rounds, the coaches came in and Chuck just stood there looking off blankly and did not say a single thing. Like, I just think he's not cut out for the coaching life, but he looks happy to be there in his board shorts and his basketball jersey. So,
Yes.
so that's going to do it for episode 2, Team Challenges. Up next is episode 3, Making Weight. It's crunch time, Julio. And I will tell you now, the next episode is going to have our first fight of the season. So buckle up, baby.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to this episode of TUFtwenty. A reminder to subscribe to the podcast, visit wearethecontrarians.com, and follow the Contrarians across social media at Contrarian Prime.
You can also follow Alex individually at Contrarian Alex, and you can check out our other special projects on our Patreon channel at patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. If you want to listen to Alex teach me about The Rock and John Cena, that's where you need to go.
You can catch me weekly on the Late Night Grin, live and free on YouTube every Friday night. In addition, Alex and I collaborate monthly on Grin Grappler, discussing some of pro wrestling's biggest and baddest. If those grins are for you, check out LNG Gold, our YouTube membership plan that includes over 50 hours of exclusive content each month.
You can follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at NotDrDeath. That's NotDrDeath. Or you can block me now and save us both a lot of embarrassment.
Until next time, be sure to make your coaches proud and don't call anyone a fatherless bastard.